Well, first of all, I'm very happy I'm with you people. I'm a conservator, a textile conservator, and I'm working on the field for more than 20 years now. I'm Greek. I live and work in Greece, and I'm working now in the last 20 years, or less than 20, 15 years, in the Directorate of Conservation of Ancient and Modern Monuments of the Greek Ministry of Culture, which is the central conservation department of the Greek Ministry of Culture based in Athens. But we are dealing with museums and collections all over the country because we are the central unit. Well, my background is archaeological conservation general. My first degree was in the University of West Africa, which was formerly known as the TEI of Athens. And after that, I really realized that I liked textiles very much. So I decided to go through some other studies. I had to leave my country and go to London, to the UK. And I did my MPhil and PhD in archaeological conservation with specialization in textiles in UCL in London, since in Greece at that time there was no university department which had any degree in textile conservation. Well, during my studies, especially for my PhD, and after that, several years, my specialization and my research area was the photodegradation and photostabilization of historic textiles, which means I really deal with natural dyes and dyeing techniques and the mechanisms of aging by light of dyes and fibers. I worked more on silk, which is the most vulnerable fiber in light damage. And I worked a lot on colorimetry because color changes are very important in during aging of historic textiles during their useful life, but also during exhibition in a museum or on display. What I mostly did was the testing of inhibitors, some materials for protection of historic textiles through a possible treatment during conservation. For those who are familiar with, textiles can be protected from light only by preventive conservation, which means we just keep them away from light and darkness, or we control lighting during exhibition in museums using filters or special gases. But in my research point of view, I tried to test some materials that can be treated on the fabric and possibly can protect the fabric during exhibition. There were some inhibitors, some materials that were tested, of course, in samples, not in original objects, which were dyed with natural dyes and dye combinations. They were treated with inhibitors. And after that, I did some light fading tests. For those who are not familiar with the test, we are using a lamp which has controlled lighting, intense lighting, of course, which imitates the sunlight or the non-controlled light during many hours of display of an object. And you can see here an example of how the samples were put around the lamp. And of course, I used blue wool standards, which are this is an example, to see how much the samples were faded after exposure. And after that, colorimetry also helped to measure, in a way, the color change. before and after treatment. More or less, this was the testing method and the research I did to find out if this material help or do more harm than we want, we want for conservation purposes. Some of them worked nice, some are very effective, some not. Unfortunately, none of them can be considered damaging, but of course there is always what the conservators think, that it is better not to treat too much any object and not to add new material in order to have the possibility to remove any treatment in the future if a new treatment better is found or something is changing on the object. So more or less, this was my research area. I have several publications, and if you are interested in my research, you can find on academia in my page or LinkedIn. They are both accessible, and most of my interesting papers are loaded on these two, so you can find them. Some of my papers in English are the ones listed here. Of course, you cannot see everything now, but I'm telling you that you can find everything in academia and LinkedIn. Of course, I have a lot of publications in the area and around textile conservation in Greek, which is difficult. It's maybe Greek to you to read, but I have several in the English language, so you can have access on that. Now, more or less, I'll give you an impression of what is my practical work on textile conservation. As I told you at the beginning, because I'm working on the central part of the Ministry of Culture dealing with conservation, and I'm the head of the textile conservation group, I deal with textile objects, historic and archaeological, from all over the country, and several and different collections. So, as over the years, I have worked on the conservation of historic costume and ecclesiastical textiles. Of course, most of the Orthodox churches I live and work in Greece. Also, I have worked on conservation of embroideries and folk art textile objects from museums all over the country, and the conservation of flags, historic or symbolic flags. Some other examples are costume accessories, such as hats, shoes, bags, fans, as in the example I'm showing you here, and the conservation of lace, either it is as a single object or part of a costume or another object. I have also have experience, and I work much on conservation of traditional costume, mainly of the Greek origins, and military uniforms and accessories of the uniform, such as hats and other. Of course, all of them are made of fabrics or have textile parts. In the recent years, I have spent a lot of time in the conservation of fashion dress, which are either of a known artist or unknown, but they are part of an important royal collection that I'm dealing in the recent years of the Tatoi Palace in Athens, which is the former palace here in Greece, and we have found several royal dress from the 1950s and onwards. And I also have an important collaboration with the National Theatre and other theatres in the country. So I deal with theatrical costumes, which involve, except from textiles, also new plastic and rubber materials, which is very interesting for us because we are dealing with some new material. And finally, an important part of my work is on archaeological textiles that I think most of you have seen in the group are working with archaeological textiles. Of course, you might know, if you are dealing with that, in Greece, it's very difficult to find archaeological textiles due to the climate and the burial conditions. So we hardly have um, uh, archaeological textiles, but we do have in our collections, or private collections. You can see here, you can see the conservation before and after of two archaeological textiles of East Iran from the 12th and 13th century, a flat textile and a child tunic before and after conservation. So we have some examples of that during my work. Now, for those who are not very familiar with the status and the procedure of conservation, I can mention that what I'm dealing with in my work is, first of all, the documentation of an object, which includes microscopy and very often chemical analysis, according to the origin, the date, and the importance of an object. I'm not doing this to every object that comes to the lab, but the most important ones. Our goal is the evaluation of deterioration, which is very important for a conservator in order to select the method and the materials for conservation. Then, if we decide that, we go to the practical conservation. I'm also dealing with the packing and storage of the objects, and the preparation for exhibition is also something that a conservator must do. And finally, I'm very interested, and I'm working with this every time, the preventive conservation in storage and display, meaning the conditions that an object should be kept or displayed in order to keep it as long as possible. Now, usually the stages of practical conservation, I have an example here of a fragment from East Iran of the 12th century from the Al-Sabah collection in Kuwait. And this is an archaeological fragment which is water cleaned. It is stabilized and under between two nylon nets like a sandwich, and it was prepared a padded board and a special case like a folder, which is kept and can be examined, displayed in the future by a specialist. Except practical conservation, my work also focused on display of historic textiles and dress, which means to prepare or create can I say it, dummies or costume mannequins that should be made by the proper materials in order to be in contact with the original fabric or costume or part of it. Flat textiles are put by the conservator, by me, to padded board, either big or small ones, in order to keep them flat and keep them vertical to display case or wall or whatever, which is also something I do. A very important role of the conservator is also packing and storage of the objects after conservation or before conservation when they are kept in storage room to be conserved. This is a whole work that can be done, that I'm doing in the objects in order to keep them safe, either flat, hanged, or kept in boxes with acid-free and inert material in order to keep them safe during storage or moving or transport for long or short periods. Now, except from all this I told you before, more of the activities I'm doing as a textile conservator in the Ministry of Culture, and I'm very interested in working on, is the disinfection and disinfestation of objects if they are having problems with insects or mold. The control of the environmental conditions in storage and display, which is preventive conservation I told you before. I'm also working on condition reports for textile objects in transport or loan. The organization of thematic seminars in textile conservation, have done several in Greece and abroad. And of course, I have a teaching experience because I was teaching textile conservation from 2001 to 2011 in the University of West Africa. And I had also some collaboration with UCL Qatar, doing online lectures and practical workshops with some travels there. So more or less, these are all the things I'm doing.